The job posting had appeared on a government employment board, buried beneath listings for custodial work and data entry positions. Security patrol officer needed for remote desert railway station. 6-month contract, lodging provided. Must be comfortable working alone. The pay was surprisingly good for what seemed like simple work. Marcus Chen had been unemployed for 4 months, burning through his savings, and the desperation had made him less selective. He applied online and received a response within hours. The interview was conducted over a video call with a man who introduced himself as station manager Harold Vickers. The connection was poor, pixelating frequently, making Vickers appear to flicker in and out of existence. He explained that the station had been built decades ago as part of a now defunct railway line that once connected mining operations in the desert. Most of the line had been abandoned, but the station remained operational for occasional freight transfers and maintenance vehicles. What they needed was someone to patrol the grounds, maintain basic security, and ensure no trespassers or vandals damaged the property. It sounded easy enough. Marcus accepted. The journey to the station took 2 days. A bus to a small desert town, then a contracted driver who seemed annoyed to be making the trip. They drove for 3 hours into increasingly barren landscape, leaving behind even the scattered homesteads and ranch land. The road deteriorated from asphalt to gravel to little more than tire tracks in the hard-packed earth. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the station appeared. It sat alone in an ocean of sand and scrub brush, a structure that seemed to belong to another era entirely. The main building was 2 stories of weathered brick with tall, narrow windows, many of them boarded over. A covered platform extended along the tracks, supported by rusted iron pillars. A water tower loomed behind the station, its paint long since scoured away by wind and sand. Several smaller outbuildings completed the complex, all showing signs of age and neglect. The driver helped him unload his bags and drove away without a word, leaving Marcus standing in the settling dust, watching the vehicle disappear into the distance. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the wind moving through the station's structure, creating sounds like whispered conversations. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the main hall was larger than expected, with high ceilings and walls lined with old benches. A ticket window sat dark and empty behind iron bars. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust that showed no recent footprints. He found the stairs and climbed to the 2nd floor, where the living quarters were located. His room was surprisingly well maintained compared to the station below. A bed, a desk, a chair, a small kitchenette with a functioning refrigerator stocked with basic supplies, a bathroom with running water, though it came out brown for several seconds before clearing. Windows looked out over the empty desert in 3 directions, to the north, the railway tracks stretched toward the horizon, parallel lines that seemed to converge in the distance, but never quite met. On the desk, he found an envelope with his name written across it. Inside were keys, a printed schedule, and several pages of instructions. He sat down to read them. Welcome to Desert Station 7. Your primary responsibilities are straightforward. Patrol the station grounds twice daily, once in the morning and once in the evening. Maintain the premises by clearing debris and reporting any structural damage. Monitor for trespassers and document any unusual activity. In addition to these duties, there are specific rules that must be followed without exception. Rule 1. Train schedules are posted in the main hall. Only trains listed on the schedule should arrive. If a train arrives that is not on the schedule, do not approach it. Stay inside the station building until it leaves. Rule 2. If you hear a train whistle at night, but see no train on the tracks, ignore it. Do not go outside to investigate. Rule 3. The storage building at the west end of the platform is locked. Do not attempt to open it. If you find it unlocked, secure it immediately and report it in the logbook. Rule 4. If you encounter people on the platform when no scheduled train is due, do not engage them. Return to your quarters and wait for them to leave. Rule 5. The tracks extend north and south from the station. Never walk along the tracks in either direction beyond visual range of the station. Rule 6. At night, keep all window coverings closed on the side of the building facing the tracks. Rule 7. If the station lights flicker 3 times in succession, move to the basement and remain there until the lights stabilize. Rule 8. The water tower should not be climbed under any circumstances. If you see someone on the water tower, do not attempt to help them down. Rule 9. Sound carries strangely in the desert. If you hear voices calling your name, verify the source before responding. Rule 10. A logbook is kept in the office on the first floor. Document all activities, observations, and rule violations. Previous entries may provide useful context. The rules were signed by Harold Vickers and dated 6 months prior. Beneath his signature, someone had written in different handwriting, "Follow these, all of these, not suggestions." The handwriting was shaky, uneven. Marcus set the papers down and looked out the window. The sun had set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. The tracks seemed to glow in the fading light, 2 ribbons of steel leading nowhere. He felt a knot of unease form in his stomach, but pushed it aside. He needed this job. The rules seemed strange, but he could follow them. How hard could it be? His first night passed without incident, though he slept poorly. The building made constant noises, settling sounds, and the wind moving through gaps in the walls. He woke frequently, disoriented in the darkness, taking long minutes to remember where he was. When dawn finally came, he felt exhausted despite the hours in bed. The morning patrol was straightforward. He walked the perimeter of the station, checking doors and windows, clearing wind-blown debris from the platform. The train schedule posted in the main hall showed only 2 trains per week, both freight services scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Today was Saturday. He had 6 days until the first scheduled arrival. He found the logbook in what had been the station office, now largely empty except for a desk and filing cabinets. The book was thick, bound in leather, filled with entries dating back years. He flipped to the most recent pages and began reading. The entries were written by someone named David Reeves, presumably his predecessor. They started normally enough, whether observations, maintenance notes, descriptions of the daily routine. Then, about a month into David's term, the tone changed. Heard train whistle at midnight. No train visible. Followed Rule 2. Did not investigate. The entries became more frequent, more detailed. Saw figures on platform during evening patrol. Could not determine source. Followed Rule 4. Returned to quarters. Marcus flipped through more pages, watching David's handwriting deteriorate from neat script to hasty scrawl. The dates became irregular, sometimes multiple entries per day, sometimes gaps of several days with no entries at all. He found an entry marked urgent. Unscheduled train arrived at 0300 hours. Black locomotive, no markings. Did not approach. Train remained for 17 minutes, then departed south. No cargo loaded or unloaded. No passengers visible. Followed Rule 1. The final entry was dated 3 weeks ago. Cannot continue. Arranged early departure. Replacement should know this place is wrong. The rules exist for reasons that become clear. Do not deviate from them. Do not try to understand. Simply survive the term. Good luck. Marcus closed the logbook and sat in silence. The room felt colder than it should be, despite the morning sun streaming through the dusty windows. He told himself that David had simply been driven to paranoia by isolation, that months alone in the desert could affect anyone's mental state, but the precision of the rules, the specific nature of the warnings, suggested experiences rather than imagination. He spent the rest of the day familiarizing himself with the station. The basement was a maze of storage rooms and mechanical spaces. The boiler system long dormant, pipes corroded and silent. The main hall echoed with his footsteps, the acoustics strange, making it sound as though someone walked behind him constantly. He checked the locked storage building and found it secured with a heavy padlock, the windows too dirty to see through. Evening came, and he performed his second patrol. The desert sunset was spectacular, the sky ablaze with colors that seemed impossible, too vivid to be real. As darkness fell, he returned to his quarters and carefully closed all the window coverings on the track side of the building. Following Rule 6, he made dinner from canned goods, ate alone at the small table, and tried to read a book he had brought. The The words would not stick in his mind. He kept glancing at the covered windows, wondering what lay beyond them in the darkness. The train whistle woke him at 2 in the morning. It was distant, but clear, the long, mournful sound of an approaching locomotive. He sat up in bed, his heart hammering. There were no trains scheduled. Rule 2 said to ignore it, to not go outside. But the whistle came again, closer now, and he found himself getting up and moving to the window. His hand reached for the curtain before he caught himself. Do not look. He stood frozen, his hand inches from the fabric, listening. The whistle sounded a third time, very close now, as though the train was arriving at the platform. He could hear other sounds too, the rumble of wheels on tracks, the hiss of steam, the squeal of brakes. A train was definitely out there. But there was no train scheduled. He forced himself to step back from the window, to return to bed. He lay in the darkness, listening to sounds that should not exist, and did not sleep again until the noises finally faded near dawn. Morning came gray and windy. He went downstairs and checked the platform. There were no signs that a train had been there. No marks on the rails, no oil stains, nothing. He made an entry in the logbook, heard unscheduled train whistle and arrival sounds at approximately 0200 hours. Followed Rule 2. Did not investigate. No physical evidence of train presence. The days began to blend together. He fell into a routine of patrols and maintenance, of cooking simple meals and reading books he could not focus on. The isolation pressed down on him, the constant wind and the empty horizon in every direction. He had a satellite phone for emergencies, but no one to call for casual conversation. The nearest human being was hours away. He had never felt so alone. On his 8th day, he encountered the figures. He was performing an evening patrol, walking the length of the platform, when he saw them. 3 people stood at the far end, near the water tower. They were too distant to make out details, but they were definitely human-shaped, definitely there. He stopped walking and watched them. They did not move. The station was empty. No trains were scheduled. Where had they come from? He took a step toward them and remembered Rule 4. If you encounter people on the platform when no scheduled train is due, do not engage them. He hesitated. They might be lost travelers, people who needed help. The nearest town was hours away, but the rule was explicit. He turned and walked back to the station building, forcing himself not to look back. When he reached the door and finally turned, the platform was empty. The figures were gone. He logged it, saw 3 figures on platform during evening patrol. No scheduled trains. Followed Rule 4. Did not engage. Figures disappeared when I turned away. His hand was shaking as he wrote. That night, the lights flickered. He was reading in his room when they dimmed, brightened, dimmed again, brightened. He counted. 1, 2, 3. Rule 7. Move to the basement. He grabbed a flashlight and ran down the stairs, through the main hall, Down another set of stairs into the basement, he found a corner in one of the storage rooms and sat on the concrete floor, his flashlight the only source of illumination. The darkness around him was complete, pressing in from all sides. He could hear the building above him, the wind outside, and other sounds he could not identify. Footsteps, maybe, or the scrape of something being dragged. He turned off his flashlight to save the battery and sat in absolute blackness, counting his breaths, trying to stay calm. Hours passed. He lost track of time in the darkness. Eventually, he risked turning on the flashlight and checking his watch. 4 in the morning. He had been in the basement for 5 hours. Carefully, he made his way back upstairs and checked the lights. They were stable now, burning steadily. He returned to his room and did not sleep the rest of the night. The unscheduled train arrived for the first time on his 12th day. He was in the main hall, updating the logbook, when he heard the whistle. This time it was different. This was not a distant phantom sound, but the real, unmistakable blast of an approaching locomotive. He went to the window and looked out. A train was coming from the north, a long black locomotive pulling perhaps a dozen cars, all of them windowless and dark. It was moving slowly, almost leisurely. He grabbed the schedule from the wall. Nothing was listed for today. This was an unscheduled train. Rule 1 said, do not approach it. Stay inside until it leaves. He watched through the window as the train pulled into the station and stopped. The locomotive sat there, engine idling, steam rising from beneath the wheels. Minutes passed. No one emerged from the cab. No cargo was loaded or unloaded. The train simply sat there, waiting. He could feel it calling to him. An irrational urge to go outside, to approach the train, to look inside those dark, windowless cars and see what they carried. He gripped the window frame and forced himself to stay still. The train sat for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes. Then, without warning, it began to move, slowly at first, then gathering speed. It pulled away from the station and continued south, disappearing into the desert. The sound of its passage faded and silence returned. He logged it immediately. Unscheduled train arrival at approximately 1300 hours. Black locomotive, 12 windowless cars. No markings visible. Did not approach. Followed Rule 1. Train departed after approximately 10 minutes. He noticed his handwriting looked like David's had toward the end, shaky and rushed. The voices started that night. He was lying in bed, not quite asleep, when he heard his name. Marcus. It was faint, coming from outside, from the direction of the tracks. Marcus, please help. He recognized the voice. It was his sister Emma, though she lived across the country and could not possibly be here. Marcus, I am lost. I need you. Rule 9. Sound carries strangely in the desert. If you hear voices calling your name, verify the source before responding. He stayed in bed, hands clenched into fists, listening to his sister's voice beg for help. It went on for nearly an hour, sometimes close, sometimes distant, always pleading. He did not respond. He did not move. When it finally stopped, he found his face was wet with tears. The storage building door was open the next morning. He discovered it during his patrol, the heavy padlock hanging open on its hasp, the door swinging slightly in the wind. He had not opened it. No one else was here. Rule 3 said to secure it immediately. He approached cautiously and peered inside. The interior was dark, the windows too filthy to admit much light. He could see shapes, objects covered with tarps, stacked crates, but nothing clearly. A smell wafted out, old and organic, like rot or decay. He did not enter. He grabbed the door and pulled it shut, securing the padlock. His hands were shaking. Something about that smell, about the shapes in the darkness, filled him with an instinctive dread. He logged it. Found West Storage Building unlocked during morning patrol. Did not enter. Secured immediately per Rule 3. He added a note. Smell emanating from interior. Source unknown. Not investigating. The patterns of the unscheduled trains became clear over the following weeks. They arrived irregularly, sometimes at night, sometimes during the day. Always the same black locomotive, always the same windowless cars. They would stop at the station, sit in silence for a few minutes to half an hour, then depart. He never saw anyone aboard. He never heard sounds from inside the cars. He followed Rule 1 and stayed inside until they left, but he began to notice details. The trains always arrived from the north and departed to the south. They never came from the south, and when they departed, they seemed to ride lower on the tracks, as though the cars had become heavier, loaded with cargo that had not been visible. What were they carrying? Where were they going? The questions ate at him, but he did not investigate. The rules existed for reasons that become clear. Do not try to understand. He saw someone on the water tower during his 4th week. A figure stood at the top of the structure, silhouetted against the afternoon sun, arms outstretched as though preparing to dive. He shaded his eyes and looked up. It was definitely a person, though he could not make out features from this distance. They stood motionless, balanced on the narrow platform at the tower's peak. Rule 8. The water tower should not be climbed under any circumstances. If you see someone on the water tower, do not attempt to help them down. Every instinct screamed at him to do something. Call out, run to get a ladder, something. But the rule was explicit. He turned away and continued his patrol. When he looked back, the figure was gone. He did not know if they had climbed down or fallen, or simply vanished. He did not want to know. The scheduled trains arrived as promised, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday each week. They were nothing like the unscheduled trains. These were normal freight locomotives with proper markings, carrying labeled cargo containers, operated by visible crews who waved to him from the cab. He would watch them arrive, watch the automated loading systems transfer containers, watch them depart. These trains felt real, solid, part of the normal world. The unscheduled trains felt like something else entirely. He began to dread the nights. The phantom train whistles came frequently, sometimes multiple times per night. The voices continued, calling his name, begging for help, using the voices of people he knew. His mother, his friends, once even his own voice calling from outside. He learned to ignore them, to lie in bed with his eyes closed and his ears covered and wait for silence. But it took a toll. He was not sleeping enough. His hands shook constantly. He caught himself talking to the empty rooms, conducting conversations with people who were not there. The locked storage building became an obsession. He would find himself standing in front of it during patrols, staring at the door, fighting the urge to open it. What was inside? Why was it locked? The smell that had emanated from it that first time had faded, replaced by nothing. An absence of scent that was somehow worse. He wanted to look, needed to look, but Rule 3 was clear, and he followed it, always securing the door when he found it open, which happened more frequently as the weeks passed. On his 43rd day, he broke a rule. It was not intentional. He was performing an evening patrol, walking the platform, when he realized he had wandered too far. He was past the station, walking along the tracks, heading north, watching the rails stretch toward the darkening horizon. Rule 5: never walk along the tracks in either direction, beyond visual range of the station. He turned to look back and felt his stomach drop. The station was barely visible, a small shape in the distance. He had walked much further than he thought. He hurried back, nearly running, his boots loud on the wooden ties. The sun was setting, and the shadows were growing long. He heard the whistle before he saw it. The unscheduled train was coming from the north, moving faster than he had ever seen it move. It bore down on him, the black locomotive enormous, the whistle screaming. He threw himself off the tracks, tumbling down the embankment, and watched the train roar past inches from where he had been standing. It was moving too fast to count the cars, but he caught glimpses through the windows. Not windowless this time, but windows, and through them he saw faces. Pressed against the glass, dozens of them, hundreds, all looking out at him, pale faces with dark eyes, mouths open in silent screams. The train was full of people. The train passed, and he lay in the sand, shaking, the sound of its passage fading. When he finally climbed back to the tracks, there was no sign it had ever been there. The rails were cold and silent. He logged it with shaking hands. Violated Rule 5. Walked beyond visual range of station along north tracks. Unscheduled train approached at high speed. Jumped clear. Train had windows. Saw faces inside. Numerous passengers. All appeared distressed. He stared at what he had written and felt something inside him crack. This was not isolation and paranoia. This was real. Something was happening here that defied explanation. The trains, the voices, the figures, They were all real. That night, he did not close the curtains. He told himself it was an accident, that he had forgotten. But he knew it was not. He wanted to see, needed to see. He lay in bed facing the window, the curtain open, looking out at the tracks bathed in moonlight. And he waited. They came at midnight. Figures emerged from the darkness, walking along the tracks from the north. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, moving in a slow procession. They were too far away to see clearly, but they moved wrong, jerky, and disjointed, like damaged puppets. As they drew closer to the station, he could see them more clearly and immediately regretted looking. They were people, but not people. Pale and thin, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces blank and expressionless. They walked past the station without pausing, heading south along the tracks, an endless column of silent figures. He watched until he could not watch anymore. Then he crossed the room and slammed the curtain shut, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Rule 6. At night, keep all window coverings closed on the side of the building facing the tracks. The rule existed because of this, because seeing was worse than not knowing. He did not sleep that night. Morning came, and the tracks were empty, no footprints in the sand beside them. No sign that hundreds of figures had walked past during the night. He wanted to believe he had hallucinated it, but knew he had not. They had been real as anything else in this cursed place. He logged it. Violated Rule 6. Left curtains open. Observed procession of figures walking south along tracks at approximately midnight. Advised future occupants to follow all rules without exception. The cost of knowledge is too high. The remainder of his term became a blur of fear and exhaustion. He followed the rules religiously now, having learned through violation the wisdom they contained. The unscheduled trains came and went. The voices called in the night. The storage building door opened on its own, and he secured it. The lights flickered, and he retreated to the basement. He documented everything in the logbook, page after page of observations and warnings, hoping his successor would heed them. The scheduled trains became his anchor to reality. Twice a week they arrived, normal and mundane, proof that the world beyond the desert still existed. He would stand on the platform and wave to the crews, and they would wave back. These ordinary people doing ordinary jobs, unaware of the strangeness that permeated this place when they were not here. He treasured those moments, those brief connections to normalcy. His final week approached, and he began preparing for departure. He cleaned his quarters, organized his belongings, made sure everything was in order for whoever came next. He wrote a final entry in the logbook, summarizing his term, emphasizing the importance of the rules. 6 months at Desert Station 7. All duties completed. Rules must be followed. They exist for protection, not control. The trains are real. The figures are real. The voices are real. Do not attempt to understand or investigate. Simply survive and leave when your term ends. I count down the hours until departure. This place takes something from you that cannot be recovered. The relief driver arrived on schedule. A woman named Sarah Chen. No relation despite the shared last name. She was young and eager, excited about the job, the solitude, the adventure. He showed her the station, explained the procedures, gave her the keys and the instruction sheets. He did not tell her about the unscheduled trains or the figures or the voices. She would learn in time. The rules would protect her if she followed them. As the vehicle arrived to take him away, Sarah walked him to the edge of the station grounds. She asked him about his experience, whether he had enjoyed his time here. He looked back at the station, at the tracks stretching north and south, at the water tower and the locked storage building. How could he answer honestly? How could he explain? It was educational, he said finally. Follow the rules, all of them, every single one. Do not deviate no matter what you think you know or understand. Promise me, she promised, though he could see she did not truly grasp the weight of what she was agreeing to. No one could until they experienced it themselves. He climbed into the vehicle and did not look back as they drove away. The station shrank in the distance, becoming a small shape on the horizon, then disappearing entirely. He was free. He had survived, but the desert stayed with him. He dreamed of trains every night, black locomotives pulling windowless cars through darkness. He would wake to phantom whistles that existed only in his mind. He could not board a real train without feeling panic, without seeing faces pressed against windows that should not have faces. The isolation had marked him in ways he was still discovering. He tried to research the station, but found almost nothing. Historical records mentioned its construction, but not its history. Maps showed its location, but no details about its operations. It existed in a gap, a place that official documentation overlooked or ignored. He found one mention in an old newspaper archive, an article about the mining operations from 70 years ago. 3 workers had disappeared near the station. Their bodies were never found. The article mentioned strange lights and sounds in the desert. Then, the mining operation shut down and the railway was abandoned. Except it was not truly abandoned. The trains still ran, just not trains anyone was meant to see. Months after leaving, he received a package. No return address, just his name and a postmark from the small desert town. Inside was the logbook from the station. Someone had mailed it to him. He flipped through the pages, past his own entries, past David's entries, back through years and years of different handwriting, different caretakers, all documenting the same phenomena. The same unscheduled trains, the same figures, the same voices, entry after entry, decade after decade. How many people had worked at Desert Station 7? How many had seen what he had seen? How many had survived, and how many had not? He found entries with his name in them from before he arrived. future caretaker Marcus, Chen scheduled for arrival. Prepare documentation. The entries were dated 6 months before he had even applied for the job. Someone had known he was coming. Someone had known his name. He flipped further back and found other entries about future caretakers. Names he did not recognize, followed by dates months or years ahead of when they were written. The logbook documented the future as well as the past. Time at the station did not work the way it should. The final pages of the book were blank. He took out a pen and made one last entry to whoever finds this book and reads these entries. The station is still there. The trains still run. The rules still protect those who follow them. I do not know what Desert Station 7 truly is or why it exists. I do not know where the unscheduled trains go or what they carry. I do not want to know. Some places are doorways between this world and somewhere else. Some places exist at the margins of reality. The station is such a place. Stay away if you can. If you must work there, follow the rules. Survive your term and leave. Carry the knowledge, but do not share it. No one will believe you anyway. The desert keeps its secrets. He sealed the book in a box and stored it in the back of his closet. He tried to move forward with his life, to forget the station and everything he had experienced there. But forgetting was impossible. The station had changed him fundamentally. He saw the world differently now, aware of the spaces between things, the gaps where strangeness leaked through. He knew that reality was thinner than people believed, that there were places where the rules of the world did not fully apply. Sometimes late at night, when he could not sleep, he would think about Sarah Chen. Had she survived her term? Had she followed the rules? Was she still at the station? Or had she fled like David had, unable to complete her contract? He had no way to know, and no way to find out. The station did not accept phone calls or email. Communication only flowed one direction, outward, never inward. Those who worked there were cut off from the world, alone with whatever haunted that place. He moved to a city, surrounded himself with people and noise and light. He took a job in an office tower, as far from the desert as he could get. He dated, made friends, built a life. But always, there was a part of him back at the station, walking the platform in the twilight, watching for unscheduled trains, listening for voices in the wind. That part of him would never leave the desert. It was the price of survival. The station took something from everyone, and what it took from Marcus Chen was his ability to fully exist in the normal world. He was marked. He was changed. He was a witness to things that should not be witnessed. Years passed. He received no more packages, no more communications. The station existed in his memory like a dream, vivid, but increasingly unreal. Had it truly happened? Had he truly seen those things? In the bright safety of the city, surrounded by concrete and glass and crowds, it seemed impossible. But he had the logbook. He had the documentation. He had his own handwriting recording the unschedulable, undeniable truth. It had been real. It was still real. And somewhere in the desert, the station remained, waiting for the next caretaker, the next witness. He thought about the people he had seen through the train windows, pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. Where were they going? What had happened to them? Were they passengers from decades ago, trapped somehow, endlessly riding the rails between stations that existed in different realities? Were they the missing miners from the old newspaper article? Were they everyone who had ever violated the rules and paid the price? He would never know. Some questions had no answers, or the answers were worse than the questions. Marcus Chen had survived 6 months at Desert Station 7. He had followed the rules mostly and learned through painful experience why they existed. He had documented everything for those who came after him. He had done his job and earned his pay and left when his term ended. By any measure, he had succeeded. But success felt hollow. Success felt like survival at a cost he was still calculating. The station had marked him permanently, and in his darkest moments, lying awake at 3 a.m, he wondered if he had truly left at all, or if some part of him remained there still, walking endless patrols, watching for trains that should not arrive, listening for voices that should not exist, trapped forever between the normal world and whatever lay on the other side of those tracks, leading into darkness. The desert remembers. The station remembers. And those who work there are remembered too, their names added to the long list of witnesses, their experiences recorded in the logbook that documents impossible things. Marcus Chen was one name among many. His story was one story among hundreds. The station had existed before him and would exist after him. The trains would continue to arrive. The figures would continue to walk. The voices would continue to call. And somewhere, someone else would accept a job posting for security patrol officer at a remote desert railway station, attracted by good pay and simple work, unaware of what they were truly agreeing to. The cycle would continue. It always did. The station needed witnesses. It fed on isolation and fear, and there would always be someone desperate enough or unlucky enough to volunteer. The desert was patient. The station was patient. They had all the time in the world. Marcus Chen had survived. That would have to be enough.